both the sides we can able to store the information on that plate, whatever plate we have, especially the plastic plate, it is coated with magnetic material. The hard disk is typically contain several rotating plates which are permanently mounted in a hard disk. Permanently inside the CPU it is kept. For example, if I want to process or if I want to access any data from floppy disk, then we need floppy drive. Welcome back to one and all. Myself, Vasanta, lecturer in Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysore. Today, we will start with the fifth session of Input-Output Memory Devices. Whereas in the previous session, you already come to know regarding computer memory. Under that, what do you mean by primary memory, types of primary memory, and the difference between RAM and ROM. Whereas in today's class, you will come to know regarding secondary memory. Why we require this secondary memory? Already we have primary memory, but still why we need secondary memory? The types of secondary memory like magnetic disk, hard disk, floppy disk, optical disk, portable storage devices. Then with that, you will come to know the difference between primary memory and secondary memory. With that, cache memory. Whereas already in the previous class, under primary memory, which are the types, how exactly the data will stored, regarding that you have studied. Whereas in today's class, you will come to know only regarding the secondary memories. Now one by one we'll discuss. What do you mean by this secondary memory? Whereas when they come on memory, there are two types, primary memory and secondary memory. Whereas primary memory stores the data temporarily, whichever data we require temporarily, that data here it will stores. Whereas secondary memory stores the data permanently for future purpose. And when they come on the capacity between primary memory and secondary memory, the primary memory capacity is very less, but secondary memory capacity is more. But when they come on speed wise, the primary memory speed is very fast, and this primary memory only can interact with the CPU. But secondary memory, it stores huge amount of data, but speed wise it is very less. Because of that, we need primary memory for future purpose. When you want to store the data permanently for future purpose, on that time we need secondary memory. Whereas since the storage capacity of the primary memory is not very large, already I told you it is not so large, it cannot hold a large amount of data including programs which may be needed for the processing. That's why we need secondary storage devices. Then secondary memory is used as auxiliary memory. The secondary memory is used for bulk storage or mass storage of program data and other information for permanently. It has much larger capacity than main memory. The capacity wise, the secondary memory capacity is more, but the primary memory capacity is very less. But when you want to process, on that time, the data can able to access only with the primary memory. The CPU can interact only with the primary memory. But when the secondary memory retains the information once stored on it, it stores the data permanently. The magnetic memory such as hard disk, compact disk, pen drive, memory cards is the most commonly used secondary memories in a computer. When they come on example for secondary memory, hard disk, floppy disk, pen drive, all this we used to call it as secondary memory storage devices. The average time required to reach a storage location and obtain its contents is called its access time. But when we come on the types of secondary memory devices, already I told you we have hard disk, floppy disk, compact disk, pen drive, all can be called as secondary storage devices. Now we will discuss one by one, that is magnetic disk. First we will discuss about regarding magnetic disk. Whereas magnetic disks are the thin circular plastic plate on which some magnetic material is coated. It's a thin plate. It's a thin plastic plate. Above that, it is magnetized. It is coated by magnetic material. The magnetic disc come in variety of sizes as well as materials. It may come on different sizes as well as on different material also. Sometimes it is made up. They use the properties of magnetism to store the data on a magnetic surface. On that plate, whatever plate we have, that plate is magnetized, that is coated with magnetic material, and it is magnetized. Above that, we can able to store the data permanently for future purpose. The disk pack normally consists of disk mounted on a central shaft, and the central shaft rotate at a speed of 7,200 revolutions per minute. It can able to rotate. Consider this is a disk. Here it can able to rotate at a speed of 7,200 rotations. It can able to perform. In the disk plate, information is stored on both the surface. Both the side we can able to store the information on that plate. Whatever plate we have, especially that plastic plate, it is coated with magnetic material. In both the side, we can able to store the data. The surface is further divided into number of concentric circles called as track. Consider this is a plate, or this plate contains concentric circles. This concentric circles can be called it as track. This can be called as track. Once again, this track will be dividing into sectors. Each box, each area, whatever area here we have, that area can be called it as sectors. Whereas this is a track, under that each box here, this is one track sector, this is one sector. The track once again dividing into sectors. Whereas magnetic disk is further divided into various sections called as sectors. Already I told you, this is the material plastic plate in concentric format. This concentric circles can be called it as, each circle can be called as tracks. And here, this once again, here it is dividing into number of sections. This each sections, each point, we used to call it as sectors here. Each one, this is one sector, everything can be one sector. To store information, it is necessary to us to identify the track and sector where it has to be stored. If I want to access any data, first I have to identify where exactly, on which track, on which sector the data is present, that we have to identify. The stored information can be read any number of times without affecting the stored data. In this sector, whatever data we have, that can be read how many times we want without affecting the data. How many times we want, that many times we can able to read the data. But when new data has to be written, it has erased the previous written data. For example, consider in this particular sector, we have some data. If I want to insert some more data on the same sector, first I have to remove this data, whatever present in that sector. Later on, I can able to insert some data on the same place. Then when you come on hard disk, here the hard disk are permanently mounted inside the CPU. But if the capacity is not sufficient, then we used to purchase a new additional hard disk. That means permanently, usually the hard disk are mounted inside the CPU. If I want, I can able to take additional hard disk also, we can able to insert here. The most common physical device for storage file is hard disk. It's a common storage secondary devices. The hard disk typically contains several rotating plates. It contains several rotating plates. Consider this is the place. Here we have so many tracks, sectors like this. We have plates. We have here, if you observe this magnetic disk, here we have in the same format. In hard disk, we have several disks. Each disk contains several sectors, everything. The hard disk is typically contain several rotating plates which are permanently mounted in a hard disk. Permanently inside the CPU, it is kept. The surface of the plates are covered with by metal oxide electromagnetic recording heads here. And here we have in each plate we have read-write head is there. On that, by using that read-write head, we can able to access the data. It performs read-write operations. We can able to perform read the data as well as we can able to write the data on that. There is one head for each surface and all head moves together. We have one plate, one rod like this. Here we have several plates are there. It will move in particular direction. There we have tracks as well as sectors. With that we have one read-write head also. That read-write head helps to read the data as well as write the data on the sectors. When we come on hard disk rotates at around 7,200 rotations per minute. Usually it can able to rotate. The modern disk typically hold 260 GB to 1000 TB of data it can store. Approximately it can store. The surface of the plate is organized as number of concentric tracks. Each track is dividing into number of sectors. If you observe here, it contains several plates, that is disk. Each disk have tracks as well as sectors. In the same way, the surface of the plate is organized as number of concentric tracks. This one can be called as track, and the tracks once again dividing into sectors. And the next one is floppy disk. Whereas already now you come to know what do you mean by hard disk, the capacity of the hard disk, and here how the plates are arranged, what do you mean by tracks as well as sectors. But when we come on floppy disk, the storage capacity of floppy disk is less compared to hard disk, and here it contains only one plate. If you observe here, in this disk we have only one plate, whereas in hard disk we have several plates, several disks are there, whereas in floppy disk only one disk we have. On that disk itself we have tracks, sectors, and on that only we can able to store the data, we can able to access. That is, floppy disk contains single plate piece of circular plate coated with metal oxide and enclosed in a plastic cover. It's a plastic outer cover. Inside this, if you observe here, there will be one disk is there. The floppy disk is small and portable. The size wise it is very small and it is portable. But when compared to hard disk, the storage capacity is less here. Storage capacity is very less because it contains only one disk, whereas hard disk contains multiple disks are contains. The three common size are 3.5, 5.25 as well as 8 dimension we are getting the size of that floppy disk. The most commonly used floppy disk are 3.5 inch with storage capacity of 1.44 megabytes of data it can store. 1.44 MB, that is 1.44 megabytes of data it can store. The disk drive for floppy disk are called floppy drive. The place where we are inserting the floppy, that place can be called as floppy drives. And the floppy disks are slower to access than hard disk and have less storage capacity. Already I told you, compared to hard disk, the storage capacity is very less as well as it is very slow compared to hard disk. Because there it contains multiple disk drives are there, whereas here only one plate, only one disk it contains. And it is very less expensive. But hard disk cost is more, floppy disk cost is less. Storage capacity in hard disk is more, storage capacity is less here. And here if I want, I can accessing rate also more in hard disk, whereas here accessing rate is also very less. Next we will discuss about optical disk. Whereas now already you come to know regarding hard disk as well as floppy disk. Next we will discuss about optical disk. What do you mean by this optical disk? Optical disk is a random access, a removable disk on which data is written and read through the use of laser beams. By using laser beams, we can able to read the data as well as write the data on that disk. The optical disk consisting of rotating disk which is coated with highly reflective material. It is coated with highly reflective material. Whereas in hard disk as well as in floppy disk, there it is magnetized by magnetic material, coated with magnetic material, whereas here it is coated with highly reflective material. The data recording on the disk is done by focusing a laser beam on the surface. Here if I want to write any data, then by using laser beam only, I can able to write the data here. And the process of recording data onto optical disc is called burning. Here if I want to write any data on the disk, then we will follow burning process. Whereas in hard disk as well as floppy disk, there it is made up from magnetic material, whereas here it is made up from highly reflecting material, and here we are using laser beams. When they come on optical disc, there are several types of optical disc: CD-ROM, DVD-ROM as well as BD-ROM. CD, DVD as well as BD. Now one by one we will discuss CD-ROM. CD-ROM stands for Compact Disc Read-Only Memory. CD-ROM stands for Compact Disc Read-Only Memory. It is read-only optical storage medium capable of holding up to 682 megabytes of data it can store. Accessing of data from CD-ROM is quite bit faster than floppy disk drive and slower than hard disk. Whereas if I want to access any data by using CD, it is fast compared to floppy disk and slower than hard disk. To read CD-ROM device called CD-ROM drive is needed. For example, if I want to process or if I want to access any data from floppy disk, then we need floppy drive. In the same way, if I want to read or write any data, then compulsory I need CD drive there, CD-ROM drive. There are two types of CD-ROM. One is CDR and one more is CDRW. Whereas CDR, it is also called as recordable CD. There whatever data we want, that we can able to record only one time. Whereas CDRW, whereas it is also called as rewritable. Consider we have one CD. On this CD, we have written everything, all the data it contains on that CD. In CD-ROM, we can able to read only one time, or how many times you want, that many times we can able to read, but writing process is only one time it is possible. Once if I written on any data on that, the data cannot be erased, and how many times I want, I can able to read here. But when you come on CDRW, there whatever data I want, how many times I want, I can able to read. If I want, I can delete the data, and on the same place, how many times I want, I can able to write on that. That is CD rewritable. The name itself suggesting rewritable. It means that the contents can be rewritten. Whereas here, we can able to record the data, and how many times we want, we can able to read here. Next will come on DVD. DVD stands for Digital Versatile Disk. Digital Versatile Disk. It is an optical disk technology with 4.7 gigabyte storage capacity. Whereas when you come on floppy disk, the capacity is less. Compared to floppy disk, hard disk capacity is more. In the same way, when you come on DVD, the capacity is 4.7 gigabytes of data it can store. It can be single or double-sided. If I want, I can, it may be single side or it may be double sided also. Sometimes it may be only single side, only one side we can able to read as well as write. In sometimes both the side we can able to read as well as write. And it can have two layers on each side. A double-sided two-layer DVD will hold up to 17 gigabytes of video, audio and other information. Whereas DVD technology uses red lasers. It uses red lasers are used here in DVD. There are two types of DVD. One is DVD-R and one more is DVD-RW. Whereas in DVD-R, it also called as DVD recordable. Only one time we can able to record, but how many times we want, we can able to read on that. Whereas DVD, RD, there we can able to write the data how many times we want on the same place. We can able to delete the previous data and we can able to write and we can read how many times we want. That's why it is called as DVD rewritable. Next, we'll discuss about Blu-ray disc. Whereas Blu-ray disc referred as BD. It is high capability storage technology with 25 GB to 50 GB capacity to store HD movie and other information. Whereas when you come on DVD, here the capacity is 4.7 gigabytes it can store. But when you come on Blu-ray disc, it can store 25 GB to 50 GB it can store. The name Blu-ray disc is derived from blue-violet color laser beams are used to write the data as well as for reading purpose. If you observe here, laser beams are used, whereas here, if you come on this, blue-violet color laser beams are used here in Blu-ray disc. And the next one is portable storage devices. The name itself suggesting portable. Wherever we want, there we can carry and we can able to process. The portable storage devices is small hard drive designed to hold any kind of digital data. Any type of data we can able to store here. There is slightly difference from portable media player which is stored and plays music and movies. Some fixed size hard drives 256 gigabytes, 320 gigabytes, 500 gigabytes and 1 TB of data approximately it can able to store. Whereas here this is mainly for storage purpose only. Next we'll discuss about the difference between primary and secondary memory. Already I told you the difference between primary and secondary, whereas primary memory stores the data temporarily, whereas secondary memory stores the data permanently. And when you come on cost wise, the primary memory cost is more because the speed is also more. With that, the CPU can interact only with the primary memory, not with the secondary memory. When you switch on the system, on that time it will take some little bit of time, is it no? That time can be called as booting time. On that time, what happens? The data will, whatever data is stored in the secondary memory, that will transfer to primary memory. Because CPU can interact only with the primary memory. That's why. It's very important question. Usually in the exam, you will get this question. Write the difference between primary memory and secondary memory. In primary memory, we have semiconductor memory, whereas here it is a magnetic or optical memory. It is a volatile memory. What do you mean by this volatile memory? As long as the power supply is there, the data remains. Once the power goes off, the data will be erased in this primary memory. But when you come on secondary memory, the data is non-volatile, that is permanent by nature. If power supply is there or not, whatever may be, the data remains constant. Whereas it is expensive, whereas here secondary memory is less expensive. Permanently it stores. Huge amount of data also it will store, but the cost wise it is less. But the cost of primary memory is more because it can store only less amount of data, but the speed wise it is more. It is very faster and it is slower. Secondary memory is very slow. It is also called as main memory. It is also called as auxiliary memory. The primary memory, for the primary memory, RAM and ROM are example. For secondary memory, hard disk, floppy disk, pen drive are the example for secondary memory storage devices. Now is it clear? Next we'll discuss about cache memory. What is the main use of this cache memory? A cache memory is a place in between the CPU and main memory. Already it is stored in between the main memory as well as CPU. It is much faster than main memory also. It is very fast compared to main memory, but it's a temporary memory. It access time is much less compared to that of main memory. Time consumption to access the data, whatever data in the cache memory, it is very less compared to main memory. It is very fast, but it is very temporary data it will store. It is very fast. For temporarily only it can able to store the data. The cache memory is an intermediate memory and it is not accessible to the user. Whatever data in the cache memory that cannot able to access by the user. But whatever data in the secondary memory that can be accessed, whereas in cache memory that cannot able to access the data. It stores instruction and data which are to be immediately needed. Whichever data immediately we need, only that type of data it can store. I will show with an example. Consider we have CPU. Inside the CPU we have register L1 cache, L2 cache, primary memory and then secondary memory. Data are permanently stored in the secondary memory. When you switch on the system, at the time of booting time, the data will transfer to primary memory. Data, application, everything will transfer to primary memory. Consider the CPU wants some data. CPU wants some data. What here it will do? The CPU will request the data in the primary memory. The CPU will request the data in the primary memory. Then from the primary memory, the data will transfer to CPU for processing purpose. Then what happens when CPU send the request? On that time, the primary memory will send the data. But while sending the data, the copy of the data will stored on this cache memory. It stores a copy of the recent data which is transferred. Then the CPU will process. Once again, if the CPU wants the same data, then it will not go to primary memory. It accesses the data from cache memory only. No need to go to once again with the primary memory. Directly it can able to access from a cache memory because the cache memory stores a copy of the data. When we come on types of cache memory, L1 cache as well as L2 cache. L1 cache is present inside the CPU, whereas L2 cache present in between the CPU and main memory. Whereas the main work of this cache memory, it's a temporary memory. It stores the recent data, recent applications as well as recent whatever we have done, that here it will store. Consider the CPU wants some data, it requests to main memory. Then while passing the data to the CPU, the copy will stored in the cache memory. Once again, if the CPU wants the same data, it will not go to primary memory. It takes the data directly from cache memory because it stores a copy of the data. That's why no need to go to primary memory. That's why the cache memory is very fast. Compared to primary memory also, cache memory is very fast. It stores the data. And if you observe, it is used to reduce average access time reading data which are normally stored in the main memory. The cache memory increases the operating speed of the system, but it is much faster, costlier than the main memory. Cost wise also, it is more here. It is very fast. There are two levels of cache memory, L1 and L2. Then on this class, what are the major things you have studied, especially regarding secondary memory? Under that, magnetic disk you have studied. What do you mean by magnetic disk? What do you mean by tracks, sectors? Then how exactly the data will be read here. Then hard disk, permanently store for permanent storage purpose, we need hard disk. And here how many plates are here in the hard disk, what is the capacity, the speed of hard disk, regarding that you have come to know. Then under that it can store 260 GB to 1000 GB of data it can store. Then when we come on floppy disk, the capacity of the floppy disk is less compared to hard disk. And if I want to insert floppy disk, then compulsory I need floppy drives. Then the size of the floppy disk, that is it may be 3.5 or 5 like that you will get, and it is very less expensive. Optical disk, it's a random access removable memory here. And here when you come on types, CD-ROM, DVD, BD. Then CD, compact disk, read-only memory. DVD, digital versatile disk. Then Blu-ray disk refers to BD here. Then the capacity is more, especially here we are using Blu-rays. Blue laser beams are used for reading purpose as well as for writing purpose. Then portable storage devices. Then the difference between primary memory as well as secondary memory. How data will stored in primary memory, how data will stored in the secondary memory. Here it will temporarily it will store. Here Permanently it stores. Capacity wise it is very less. Capacity wise it is more. It is very fast. It is very slow. CPU can interact only with the primary memory, not with the secondary memory. Example for primary memory, RAM and ROM. Example for secondary memory, hard disk, floppy disk, compact disk, DVD, everything you can give. Then cache memory is a high-speed memory placed between CPU and main memory. And here, whatever data in the cache memory that cannot be accessed by the users, only by the CPU it can able to access, and it stores the recent data which we access from the main memory. And this is a diagram to represent the cache memory. Now is it clear for all of you? Next class, we will meet with you once again with a new chapter. Thank you for all of you.